All right, hey guys, how's it going? I am joined here by Mark Gudgel, and this is the candidate that we are backing for the Omaha mayoral election right now, with our current goal being to get through the primaries. I posted a thread on my subreddit a few days ago for you guys to ask questions about him. It's just an easy way to promote what we're doing. It's an easy way to give you guys kind of an idea of who it is we're actually supporting, since a lot of you guys don't know as much about him as you would have about like Warnock and all that stuff and whatnot. And then also it gives me a chance to grill him a little bit on stream, see if his debate lord skills are up to par. And yeah, so real quick, do you want to give like a brief rundown of who you are, what you do, aside from just running for mayor, obviously, so that people have kind of an idea of what you're about?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And first, David, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this and your support and the support of anybody who's listening right now. I used to be the executive director of a nonprofit, and, volunteers make the world go round. And I've never been more acutely aware of that than, when I started running for office. But, to be completely honest, I wasn't sitting around looking for an office to run for. I'm a classroom teacher. I'm a high school English teacher. I'm proud of teaching in the public schools, and I've been doing it for 17 years, and I love it. I've worked for the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And like I said, I co-founded and then was the executive director of the Educators Institute for Human Rights. But really, I've been living my dream as a teacher and a husband and a father for years now. I'm really comfortable and really happy. But I look at my hometown here of Omaha, and I recognize that the people I love are in jeopardy. And that's really what's pushed me to run for office. All the students and former students, my own children, live in a city that I think is heading in a really dangerous direction. And as I spoke with some close confidants, I realized, and they pushed me in the direction, of running for office. And so here we are. We're now, I think, 70. I haven't checked the campaign calendar today. I think we're about 74 days from the election, from the primary election. Not that I'm counting.
Mm-hmm.
And things are going great, but we are incredibly excited to have your support. So thank you.
Yeah. So before we hop into the AMA questions, actually, I'm just curious, in terms of running for mayor, what was the biggest thing that made you want to run for mayor, and then why mayor over any other position, city council or state legislature, anything like that?
And that is great. I think it's the dean of the Creighton Law School asked me that like an hour ago.
Okay.
And I think he was relaying the message from a student, actually,
mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken. But the reality is that, well, it's twofold, I think, when it comes to that question. The first is that I'm not a politician, and I don't have much respect for career politicians. I said in an interview one time, if you ran for airport authority, not because you wanted to, but because you could run unopposed, so that later you could run for metro board, so that you could run for school board, so that you could run for city council, so you could run for mayor because you really want to be the governor, right? If you view every job you hold as a rung on a ladder that you're climbing, then it's pretty obvious this is about you. And I'm a high school teacher. I'm a public servant. And holding office should be about service. It should be about serving other people. As the mayor, I'm not the boss of the city. I answer to every last human here, right? I'm looking to be the underling of 500,000 people, And I think it's a problem when people don't view the job as service.
What are insofar as like making a difference and doing the job as Omaha, I'm sure there must have been like one issue or like one or two things that you saw and you were like, this is like too much. Like I'm going to run, like, forget this. Like what were those like one or two issues, that like really triggered you, I guess, or set you off such that you really felt like you had to run?
Yeah, thanks. So, it was this spring really that did it. We're in a pandemic, and the city was badly managed in the pandemic and still is.
Mm-hmm.
We're at the current moment, the state is distributing vaccines at a terribly slow pace and slower than 33 other states.
Mm-hmm.
We were, as Omaha, We were the last major city in the country to implement a mask mandate. That's embarrassing.
Is it? I could be wrong on this. I should know this. Is Omaha a top 50 population city in the U.S.?
We're number 40, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, gotcha. I thought so. Okay, yeah, gotcha. All right.
Slightly larger than Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Or as I like to say, if you're on the I-80 corridor, we're the biggest city between Denver and Chicago.
Gotcha. Okay, that's one way to put it.
Not including Texas in there. But there were other issues too, you know. When our citizens congregated to protest the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, they got gassed using weapons that our military is not allowed to use.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened to our civilians, and I found that incredibly problematic. Later in the summer, after I'd already decided to run, we arrested more than 100 people for thought crimes. That's not a real charge, right? But they were arrested for their, I'm quoting, potential to commit a crime. And that horrified me as well. And then I think the other major issue is that everything in this city that we love and hold dear is leaving. Our small businesses are either leaving or shutting down. Our best and brightest, our most wonderful young people are leaving, going elsewhere, not coming back. I believe you're a native of Omaha in Huntington Beach right now, if I'm not mistaken,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're a very good example, one of countless, but nevertheless, a very good example. I want your talent here.
Mm-hmm.
I want your intellect and your contributions and your tax dollars here, not in Huntington Beach or anywhere else, you know?
Yeah.
And then, you know, our companies are leaving too. I moved here when I married my wife, and, you know, quite some time ago, but 5 years ago, we had 6 Fortune 500 companies in this city. We now have 4, right? So a third of our Fortune 500 companies have left in the last 5 years. We can't sustain that. You know, we can't lose the jobs. We can't lose the tax revenue.
Mm-hmm.
We can't lose the flights in and out of the city. There won't be anything left of this city if we continue in this direction. So those things combined to really, I think, push me over the edge.
I think I remember, was it 5 years ago? Was it not Oriental Trading? Was it ConAgra? I think that moved their headquarters out of Omaha. And it was like, yeah, a lot of people were really worried.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you know what? They told us why they did it too. It's because of brain drain. We can't hire the people we want in Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there are people in Omaha who get kind of bent out of shape about that. They're like, no, the CEO's from Chicago. And I always point out, I'm like, yeah, but he answers to a board of directors
mm-hmm. that
have one job in the world, and that's make money.
Yeah.
And they thought it was a good idea too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is, I don't envy your position. We talk about this on my stream a lot. It's very disappointing that in the United States, the obsession is always moving to a coast. And I was at UNO for a time, and I graduated from, like Creighton Prep, so everybody wants to go to college or whatever. And your hallmark or the way that you know if you're successful is if you escape Omaha. And anybody that stays there, you know, people always look down on you. And it feels that way of a lot of Midwestern places. I think even Chicago and Kansas City will have issues with that, where people don't really want to stay there. They want to go, you know, either east or west and be on the coast, which is obviously not good because then those places get like more and more, you know, run down. Companies move out because everybody wants to go somewhere else to get paid. Yeah, which is really, yeah.
No, it's a cycle, and it's a serious problem
mm-hmm.
for us.
Okay, well, I am going to just start reading down some of the questions. Feel free to answer them as you want. I'll kind of poke and prod you, depending on how you answer for some things. And yeah, here we go. So these were submitted on my subreddit. There's a Reddit post that's up. If you have more questions, you can always feel free to post here, and then I might refresh and see if I can grab any questions at the bottom. I don't know how much Christian has talked to you or if we've communicated last, but I think right now we have around 70 confirmed people that are going to be out for our first weekend of canvassing, which is really awesome. So maybe this will encourage a few more people.
I want to tell people that I just
mm-hmm.
I just reached out to a really wonderful donor, and I'm not entirely sure if they want to be anonymous or not, but
mm-hmm.
I said, we've got 70 volunteers coming to town. I want to make sure they all have a Gudgel for Mayor sweatshirt.
Yeah.
And she was like, done. And so we're going to outfit you guys when you get here.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. All right. Well, on that note, then I will start reading these down. So the Oh yeah, and then true. And then I had a quick conversation with Christian before because I didn't know why we were wasting money booking like a hotel, like a ballroom. I didn't know why we wouldn't just go outside to a park or whatever. And I forget living down here in California that it gets cold in other parts of the country because it's so warm down here all the time. And I looked it up, and yeah, it's going to be very, very, very cold up there. I think in the 20s or teens even next week. So yeah, the sweaters will definitely help. Hopefully.
7 today, something like that. It was chilly.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like fun designs or anything worked up? Is like a big picture of your face, or does it just say like Gudgel for mayor or something, or Gudgel for mayor?
It's the most. I don't want to say it's boring. It's nicely done, but it's our logo, so it'll be like that.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. Okay, cool.
Probably the same. With our yard sign, we just went blue and white, so it's probably going to be just blue and white.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Okay, so number one from Thady Guy, I think his tag is the woofist. So he asks, is there a policy/program/approach in your platform that may not be a popular topic of discussion, but you think will make significant difference in the lives of people of Omaha? What is something that you can't wait to deal with when elected?
Okay. I could go in a lot of directions with that, but I've got one I really love that I think is pretty under the radar. It got a little coverage when we released it early on, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, right, we've talked about the election being April 6th, the primary, and then the general is May 11th, 35 days later, right? And those are standalone municipal elections that do not coincide with other elections. I mean, they're city council and stuff. Forgive me, this is idiotic. It costs the city hundreds of thousands of dollars to put these two elections on. And the result is a voter turnout that is pathetic, and I can quantify pathetic. We have almost 500,000 people living in the city limits of Omaha. Our metro area is 1 million, but within the actual city limits, we have almost 1 million people, or 500,000 people, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And in the primary in 2017, the last time one was held, 58,000 people voted. So in other words, right, just over 10% of people voted in the primary. 35 days later in the general,
mm-hmm.
fewer than 100,000 people voted. So less than 20%. And half of those voted for the guy who lost, -1 maybe, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was pretty close, as it typically is. So in other words, 1 in every 10 people in this city actually said, yeah, I think the current mayor should be the mayor. And the other 90% did not actually acquiesce to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can fix that problem by moving the elections to make them coincide with presidential elections. It's going to cost me 6 months off my first term as mayor, and that is a price I am happy to pay to end voter suppression and stop wasteful spending.
Gotcha. Because you'd be moving the next mayoral election would basically be moved up then, or moved closer to. Sure.
Right.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
My next primary, if we succeed in doing this, it'll require the city council's support. So,
Are you able to do as mayor and city council? Okay, I'm going to be totally honest. I talk politics for a living for the past 5 years, and even I don't 100% know all of the different structures. I know the federal stuff, but the municipality stuff I can't. So when you are mayor, okay, are you like, mayor is like president of the city, and then city council is like your Congress of the city, basically, right?
yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So as mayor, do you have the ability with the support of the city council to move that election, or do you need to get the governor and the state legislature on board with that?
No, thank God I don't need our terrible governor for much of anything that we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I should be a little careful because we probably want to be able to work with him, but he's universally understood to be pretty awful. Anyway, that's distracting.
Yeah, no problem. But so this is realistically, you guys could do this without, you don't need rickets or anything else. You can just, as long as the city council supports you.
What we're going to have to do is amend the city charter, and you'll hear me talk about that again later tonight on some other questions, I'm sure. But the city charter was written in 1957 under Johnny Rosenblatt, who the stadium was named after.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how this happened. And so we're going to overhaul the city charter, and one of those pieces is going to be moving the election. And it will take the city council. I have all the faith in the world that they're going to do the thing that's going to save us money and increase voter turnout.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Number 2 from Bait. Oh, and obviously it sounds like a good idea. I can't imagine actually why you would have 2 separate elections, probably as an effort to reduce turnout, perhaps maybe for the mayoral one. But otherwise, I don't know why. Yeah, it seems like it makes sense that you would just do it all on the same ticket, or at least on the same day. Yeah. Question number 2 comes in from Beta Mail. What's the number one issue facing the city of Omaha today? What will be the primary policy focus of your office if elected mayor? So you're mayor and you want to blow all of your political capital on one issue you think is the most important issue. If you could fix one thing about Omaha that's within your power as mayor to do so, what would that issue be?
We've got to stop brain drain.
Got to stop what?
Brain drain.
Brain drain. Okay.
And it's, as I said to someone tonight whose son is interviewing with Stanford next week. He's one of my, I want him to go to Stanford, go to MIT, go to Chicago, go to Yale. We've got to give him something to come back to. And it's got to be worth coming back to. And it's going to take some political capital, because the pieces that go into that, right? Stopping brain drain is an idea, not a policy. The policies that go into that, things like improving public transportation, making sure there are companies here to work for, fighting climate change so that you don't feel like you live in the one place in the world that doesn't understand science. There's so many important things that we have to do in this city. And I fully expect to burn a lot of political capital getting those done. But ultimately, they all lead in the same direction. And that's keeping people not only in the city, but in the city limits where they're paying taxes. And a lot of my policies actually point toward that. Nobody wants to have their taxes increased, but I'm a big fan of carrots and not sticks.
Yeah.
And, if I can give you a carrot that makes you want to live here instead of Papillion or Gretna, I'm going to do that because I want your tax revenue to help pay for firefighters and to fix the roads.
Gotcha. So. I'm going to ask you, this is going to be a hard one. Okay. I'll follow up on that because I'm curious. Yeah. So I remember that Omaha, and I don't actually know if it changed, but Omaha was at one point, still are the home of the College World Series, right?
Yep.
We held on to that. Now I know that there were big fights in the city over how much do we want to pay versus how much do you make, college baseball pay versus, and I know that every city will have these fights over, like, we want a new stadium. We don't know if the city should be responsible or if the organization should be responsible. And then people fight over that. And then people also fight over, like, corporate tax policy, where very famously in some section of New York City, Amazon was going to come in and they wanted like lower corporate taxes in exchange for them being there. And then AOC and her constituents, I guess, basically said, no, we're not going to make it any lower, like leave. And in some ways the city was happy because they didn't have to kind of like go to the bottom of the barrel for a corporation. And then in other ways the city is sad because, well, now they lost out on all those potential jobs. This is a very hard question, by the way. I don't expect you to have a good answer. How do you balance out the frustrations of some Omahans that might think that corporations pay too little taxes, or that corporations are getting a good deal on something, but also make deals that are sweet enough for companies to want to come to Omaha during those negotiations? Like, how do you foresee like balancing out like the desires of your constituents with the companies wanting to pay like the least amount of tax possible to bring them to Omaha?
Right. So I think the answer, honestly, is relatively simple, given how complex the question is. And I suspect it'll resonate. It's about public information. It's about education. I so frequently meet with people who don't know what's going on in this city, not because they're dumb, but because there's not a lot of good ways to find out. And the city doesn't make any effort to actually communicate what they're doing. They hold meetings at obscure times, and I mean, I've got a copy of the city budget sitting on my chair over there. And well, here, I'll show you just because I think it's entertaining. Hold on. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to have this. I should be careful. This is the city budget for 2020. Okay. What would have to be wrong with you to read this?
Yeah.
What would have to be going wrong in your life to make you want to spend time reading that? And more importantly, the question is, why in the hell is the city not putting out a document that its people can actually process and understand? So when it comes to like corporate tax breaks, which is what you asked about, first, my team and I, my administration and I, are going to do a cost benefit analysis. Okay, so Peloton wants to come to Omaha and manufacture bikes here and hold a studio here. Okay, well, how many employees do they bring? How many Omahans do they employ? What kind of tax revenue does that turn into? And is this good for the city?
Mm-hmm.
Once we determine that, we'll determine what kind of tax breaks we can give them. And then we'll make sure the people understand, look, this is how this benefits you. Yeah, Peloton's not going to pay a dime in taxes for 13 years. That was the deal we struck. But they're going to employ 350 Omahans, right? They're going to build X and Y. They're going to, and we just make sure people know about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, honestly, as a resident of the city, if you were to say to me, I know this looks bad, but here's the deal, I'd say, okay, I might still gripe about my taxes because I'm still human, but I get it, right? And if you can get more people into this city to pay their taxes, to go out to eat, to buy houses here, to buy cars here, to labor here, and to contribute to our city, it's worth paying for. You mentioned New York, and I think that's a great example because New York loses Amazon, and it's like, cool, where were we going to put that anyway? This island is packed.
Mm-hmm.
Omaha loses 2 Fortune 5s. We're down 33% of our Fortune 5s. We don't have that. We don't have surplus companies here. We don't have a surplus of jobs in this city. We have to fight for them, and I'm going to.
Gotcha. All right. This question comes from Phoenix. He says, what differentiates you from the other Democrats running in the election? And then I'll narrow this a little bit. Obviously, Neary is like your biggest competitor, I think, in the primary. So somebody wants to vote in a Democrat. They think, this guy pulls a little bit better. Like, I should probably just vote for him instead. Like, what pulls you? What pulls somebody from Neary over to you think?
Sure. And I'll tell you, there's Neary. There's also Kimra Snipes, Jasmine Harris, and there are a handful of pretty good independents in this race as well. There are 8 of us now, I believe, running for mayor, and some pretty good folks. I think what differentiates me from the field by far is my vision for this city. Other people may have some pretty good ideas, and there's definitely some passion out there and whatnot. I have a really clear vision for the future of Omaha, what it can be and how we can make it what it needs to be in order for not only us currently, but for our children and grandchildren to thrive here. And you find some of that in the platform on my campaign, but we've been releasing policy every week. We really, on Fridays, and we released a policy today just as an example that is a part of that vision that I'm so excited about. And it's called Our Omaha. And it's modeled in part after My City, which is a program in Nashville and maybe elsewhere to help acclimate refugees and immigrants to your community.
Mm-hmm.
And to just give people a taste of that, like we have 20,000 South Sudanese in Omaha alone. That's our largest population. But we also have Somalis and Afghanis and Burmese and Nepalese, and I could go on. Mm-hmm. And so we got these huge immigrant populations and no structures in place that are worth talking about to help them. And yet they come here, they open businesses. In fact, they're almost twice as likely to open a business, which will pay taxes and employ people and drive our economy. They're twice as likely to do that as someone who was born here. Mm-hmm. Right. And in exchange, we need to help them, thrive in this city. And so we released the Our Omaha policy today. And if you're listening and that's interesting to you, check out our webpage, gudgelformayor.com, FOR. And, just look into it, please. If you get on there, you'll find actually a podcast that we recorded explaining it and a newsletter that touches on it. And within the next couple of weeks, we're going to have the actual policy link up on our webpage mm-hmm. that will point you to all of our detailed policy plans. And it's a little like that budget I showed you. They're pretty in depth, but ultimately, if you want to really know what differentiates me from the field, it's not all bluster. There are real data-driven ideas behind my campaign. And real tangible things that are going to make this a better city for all of us.
Gotcha. Awesome. Cool. I used to live down in Bellevue, off of, Highway 370 off of like 25th and Capehart, and the Offutt Air Force Base is down there. So there were always like, I had a lot of different types of friends from all over the world just because people would come in and out of the Air Force Base and then settle in like either Bellevue or move up to Omaha. A lot of people don't realize that. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Um,
But we need to make their lives a little easier and help them to acclimate and contribute.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. This is from a guy called Bad Social Skills. His question is, first of all, thank you for running on a platform to combat climate change. As a young adult, I appreciate these efforts. What do you think have been shortcomings of incumbent Jean Stothert, and how do you plan on addressing these shortcomings? So I guess, what do you think are Stothart's like kind of biggest failures? And then what are you going to do differently than her? Like, I imagine she's probably got reasons for why she's failed the way she has. How are you going to overcome her deficits?
Sure. A couple of thoughts on that. The first one maybe relates back to what we were just talking about. With respect to Mayor Stothert, someone said to me the other day, the city has a manager, it needs a leader. Now, I would argue that she hasn't been a terribly effective manager, but I don't think anybody can argue that she's actually a leader for this city. We have horrifying racial tensions taking place, and she's hiding behind her gate. She's not out in the community. We're in the face of a pandemic, right? A situation that is shutting down our businesses and killing our residents. And we're not getting regular press briefings. We're not getting regular addresses from our mayor. At the very least, you could characterize that as a missed opportunity, but I think it's far more than that. I think it's a lack of leadership. Mm-hmm. And so I think, my vision and my ability to actually lead set me apart. But I want to circle back to the question of climate change as well. And thanks for pointing out that my platform, we also have released our policy on climate change. And I personally think it's very good. I helped to author it, but it's important stuff. There's not going to be anything left of this city to fight for if we don't at least stop the effects of climate change. Hopefully we can learn to reverse them in time. I'm not the science guy, but we got to get moving on this. Mm-hmm. It's not one of those things that we can continue to put off. And, that's a part of the program as well that I think is really important, and a place where I think that the incumbent has failed. As a simple example, it might even seem too simple, but I think it's a microcosm of a big problem. Our city council actually banned plastic bags a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. We used to work in Rwanda. The nation of Rwanda banned plastic bags, a country, right? Mayor Stothert vetoed the plastic bag ban because she felt that it was, I think she thought it was going to be too hard on Walmart. I'm actually not sure what the concern was. I'm not real worried about what's hard on Walmart.
Gotcha.
But ultimately we need to fight the plastic bag. We need to fight for the environment, and I don't see that happening.
So I'm going to ask you two follow-ups on this, an easier one and then a pretty tough one. So easy one, in terms of transparency. So like, I know like the Biden administration is in, they say they're going to do more press briefings and everything than the Trump administration. In terms of like mayor, what is your, like when you talk about being transparent, is it as normal that mayors have these types of press briefings, or what when you say transparency, it's a word that a lot of like politicians throw around, but what does that look like?
Yeah, so it should be. Now I'll say, I've been out and about and very active in this community for a very long time, and I've never actually met our mayor. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's a statement. You should know your mayor. You should personally know your mayor. And so when we think about transparency, the reason my campaign launched a podcast in the beginning of the campaign and started writing a newsletter was to model the sort of government transparency that people can expect when my administration comes to be. And so we'll continue with podcasts, possibly video addresses. If there were an opportunity to have a weekly radio show where the mayor took questions like this from the people in the city, I think that's a great idea. I'd love it. I'd eat it up. Mm-hmm. Maybe what we need is a Reddit, I'm open to learning and doing whatever it is that helps us communicate. I'm going to be all about public information as a mayor. I think it's incredibly important that people know what's going on. And then the second piece of that is actually being there. right? When people are gathered, you know, at 72nd and Dodge to protest injustices in the world, and they say they're going to march to Memorial Park, the mayor should be at the front of that march leading it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what we're seeing right now. And that's what people can expect from me as mayor.
Gotcha. Second one is going to be harder. So as somebody that has lived for 30 years in Omaha, now lives for a couple years down in LA, basically, if somebody were to tell me that climate change was really important in LA, I could understand. Like if you're driving into LA from like Vegas or from someplace out east, you can see the smog. Like it is noticeably polluted here. But when I think of like Omaha or a lot of Midwestern cities, it doesn't really look that bad to me. Like I can't see, if I'm in Omaha, I can't see pollution in the same way that I can if I'm like in LA. When you talk about like energy efficient measures or green energy or stuff that would, at the end of the day, maybe raise the cost of energy for a lot of people in Omaha, when it comes to like your local utilities, your OPBD, your MED, how do you sell them on that idea? How do you alleviate fears for people that might work in energy sector related jobs or in like middle class or working class citizens who are worried that they're going to see an increase in the cost of energy? How do you communicate climate change to them in a way that's not, I guess, scary for them?
Sure. I think you hit the nail on the head with the word communicate. I think one of the things we have to do is figure out as an administration what the best way is to really get the message across about the long-term benefits, even if it's a short-term pinch. But I think to some extent that short-term pinch may be avoidable as well. You know, I think we can make it painless. You know, I understand. I agree completely. You get into LA, you get into some of those places, and you feel like you can see it, you know. But that, you know, just because we don't see it here doesn't mean it's not happening. And I know you know that.
Yeah.
But like, you know, it was so cold today. I was at a funeral earlier today, an outdoor gathering, and it was so cold that I could feel my wife shaking next to me, and she was in a coat with gloves on. 48 hours ago, it was 53 degrees here. And to some extent, people are just like, oh, Nebraska, the weather, huh? We're affecting that. And we need to get a lid on it.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately we can point to a lot of examples to people. And the other thing is that, again, as I've already mentioned, I mean, this is a city larger than Minneapolis. You wouldn't know it because we've been so mismanaged for so long that there's no prestige, you know, the way there is with Minneapolis. People know Minneapolis. But, and you know, they thrive because of their leadership, or they have in some ways. But we're role models. We set an example. And right now we're failing. Right now, you look at the small cities around us, Lincoln, which is half our size, Des Moines, which is significantly smaller, and you could go, you know, there are others as well. Ames, Iowa comes to mind. It's a tiny little town. And those cities have climate action plans. Kansas City, Missouri, which is almost the same size as Omaha, has a climate action plan. Kansas City, Kansas, I believe, has one. They all have said, this is what we're going to do about this problem. And Omaha is the one stuck here scratching ourselves going, what problem? And it's embarrassing, like not implementing a mask mandate when the rest of the country figured it out. It's embarrassing, and it has to stop. Not because we can't stand to be embarrassed. It's not about pride. It's about doing the right thing for our citizens, and we're not.
Gotcha. For the next question, Fallon says, how are you going to approach growing/retaining businesses within Omaha?
So it's about your verbs are great. It's about growth. It's about retention. And then I'm going to add a verb. It's about recruitment. And so with growth, right? Well, I mean, with anything else, right? I grew because I ate, right? I had fuel. And so I think that we can give businesses fuel, whether you're, you know, a Fortune 1000 aspiring to break into the 500, and we've got a bunch of those, or, well, not a bunch, I think we've got 9. Or whether you're a mom and pop bookstore like the one my parents own, trying to figure out how to get past Amazon. You know, well, what can we do to give you fuel? And I think we've got all kinds of ideas, big and small. something I love is the idea, I'm going to bolster public transportation in a big way. And I love the idea of not charging seniors to use it.
Mm-hmm.
What do seniors love to do? They love to go out to eat. They love to be around people and congregate. And soon we're going to be able to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Go out to eat, you're paying the restaurant tax. Let's get you there. Do I need the $1.50? That bus was going to run anyway. Let's get you there. So there are things we can do to incentivize it. Let's get you to the restaurant. Let's get you to the small privately owned bookstore or coffee shop or whatever it is. But it has to go beyond that. So, I mentioned recruitment. And, I think the biggest thing, one of them, I was speaking with a former mayor of Omaha. He was mayor 30 years ago. Uh-huh. And I said, what's to keep the mayor from flying to New York and going, you guys, I've looked at your books. You're having a hard time making ends meet here in Manhattan. How would you, let me talk to you about the American Midwest. I can cut your operating expenses by 74%. I think they'll listen. They're beholden to shareholders, right? I think they'll listen. Uh-huh. And if we can bring them to a city and say, look, there is land, there is a skilled workforce, there are all the things, which means fighting brain drain, right? There's a symmetry to all of this.
Yeah.
We can say, we've got what you need, and it'll cost you almost nothing to be here by contrast with what you were paying to be in Manhattan.
You gnome!
In the very least, they're negligent if they're not listening, if they're not having the conversation. So I think we can recruit. So there's actually a lot that I think that we can do as a city to bolster our economy and specifically through business.
Mm-hmm. Do you think when it comes to, I guess I'm commenting on you mentioned the kind of feedback loop. It sucks because as companies leave, people leave, and then no company wants to come because nobody's there, and it all kind of plays into itself pretty hardcore. This is you don't have to answer this because I don't know if this will give your hand away or whatever, but I'm curious. Do you have any idea of maybe not a specific company, but a type of company that you think might be suited to Omaha? I don't see why XYZ company, for example, a lot of people tech companies should move to Austin, or they're starting to, because, there's a lot of people there. It's a good place to look at. Have you thought about this would be an appropriate type of company to move to Omaha?
So yes, I have, and I'm happy to tip my hand, as it were. But I'd point out, it was a member of my staff that knew you that connected us, right? Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it is who you know. I think that we can absolutely sit down with our chamber, sit down with. I think everybody knows Warren's from here, right? But he's not the only one. There's some real heavy hitters who live in this city, and I think we can say, who do you know that would really flourish here? Mm-hmm. Because we want this to be mutually beneficial. I don't want to talk a company into relocating here from Portland only for them to find out that they can't do well in Omaha.
Yeah.
So, who do you know? And I think using connections that are there makes sense. But the other thing is that our labor force, right? One of my plans, a policy we're going to release here in about, I think actually it might come out next week, is on offering free college tuition to everybody who graduates high school in Omaha. And I can elaborate on that if you want. But the point is, we're going to build that labor force, mm-hmm. right? And when I say college, I'm educated, but when I say college, I'm talking post-secondary education. If you're an electrician, you went to college, as far as I'm concerned, absolutely. Trade school is valuable, and the trades are not only well-paying careers with benefits, but they're also really meaningful. They can be satisfying. They're important to our communities. They're important to our way of life, right? And so whether you want to go get a degree in philosophy or become a plumber or a chef or or if you want to be a nurse or a teacher or anything else, we want to help you do that. You're going to stay here. You're going to get educated here. You're going to fall in love and marry somebody, you poor schmuck. And you're going to be here in Omaha, and then we've got our labor force so that those other the companies go, oh, well, yeah, that brain drain thing ConAgra was worried about. Well, they fixed that, didn't they? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big part of it.
So in terms of free college, now that's expensive on the city budget. How do you think you find the money to fund? Obviously, this is a hard question, yeah, but when we're already having problems shoring up our elementary school budgets, right, and paying our teachers as much. How do you think you're able to negotiate that much money? Would you need aid from the state, or?
Negotiate's the right word. What it boils down to me is symmetry and the city becoming a catalyst. One of the first things I'm going to do is to create a web page and a small department of people to oversee this project. What the web page is going to do, it's really, I mean, to think of it as a web page is a little simplistic, but it's going to be a resource for synthesizing resources for young people. And so, for example, Hy-Vee grocery stores and Burger King, McDonald's, Walmart, and some other employers in town do college reimbursement.
True.
We're going to find out who all of them are. We'll start there, right? We also have an incredible philanthropic community that cares deeply about young people and education. One donor in particular offers an unlimited number of scholarships to high school seniors in Omaha public schools to go to college in Nebraska. And so there's a lot of resource there. There's I think it's, forget the name of the program, Nebraska Promise maybe, that lower people of without the means, without the financial means, can now go to the University of Nebraska for free. All colleges offer scholarships on some level for free, but what there isn't is something to synthesize all of this. And then, right, so that's going to get, the synthesis will get us a long ways.
Gotcha.
It won't get across the finish line. So the punchline here is we have buying power. We are a massive municipality. And so I'm going to go to, say, the University of Nebraska at Omaha or Creighton. Obviously, as a candidate, I don't have the kind of clout that I will as mayor. As mayor, I go to these places, we sit them down, I go, look, I would like to buy 4 million credit hours from you, but I want to pay 3 cents on the dollar. They're all going to be Omaha kids. And by the way, you wanted that street in front of your college repaved. It'll be done tomorrow. Right? And so we say, what can we give? What can you give? And we meet in the middle there and we find a way, we leverage the buying power of the city. And this circles back to the vision that I'm talking about, being willing to actually do these things. And if that sounds, I hope that people hear that and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. If you don't, if you hear that and you go, I don't know if that works, it worked in Pittsburgh. It works in San Francisco. It works in a number of other places. And the best part of the whole thing is that the long-term vision, right? You wind up with more educated citizens who have better jobs, who make more money, who then spend more money in your city, and you tax all of it. It's good for it's good for the individual. It's good for our residents, but it's also good for the city if you can think beyond tomorrow. And all of that is deeply important to my vision for the city.
Do you, small question, I remember you mentioned the restaurant tax. I know that at one point, a lot of people in Omaha weren't the most fond of that. I think I remember at one point when it was implemented, some restaurants would notate the bottom of your bill and they would call it the mayor's tax because of the, have people warmed up to that idea in Omaha more for some of those entertainment related taxes, or is that still a contentious issue?
You know what's funny? Mayor Stothert campaigned saying she was going to repeal the restaurant tax. Not only did she not repeal it, there was actually, she had the opportunity to reduce it and she didn't even take that.
Yeah.
But here's what I'll tell you. I've talked to folks in the restaurant industry and most of them agree that people are not going out to eat less because of the tax.
Yeah.
The restaurant tax, when Omaha's restaurants were thriving, which they are not right now, generated about $35 million a year in tax revenue.
Is that all the sales tax at a restaurant, or is that just that restaurant tax?
That's just the restaurant tax itself, $35 million a year.
Wow. Wait, if you don't mind me asking, this might be really particular. What is like the budget of Omaha every year?
I believe that monstrosity, that tome I just showed you, I believe we're at about 1.3 billion.
Okay, gotcha. So that's a decent chunk of change. Yeah.
A whole lot of bonds, right? We love to borrow money short term in this city. So, maybe that number's a little misleading. The other thing is 1.3 billion is a joke because we aren't going to have that money. People keep telling me, well, Omaha is probably going to experience about an $80 million shortfall from COVID. And I think we experienced an $80 million shortfall from the start of COVID through, oh, the World Series isn't going to happen. Crap.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I mean, the long-term effects of this thing are horrific. Our hotels are empty. Our restaurants are borderline empty. I mean, furloughs and layoffs. This is a mess, and it was avoidable. But with the restaurant tax, most folks I talk to don't seem to, it's not deterring people from going out to eat. And so I don't see us getting rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be willing to pledge not to raise it. I want to do everything I can to support restaurants.
Yeah, especially with everything coming back online after the coronavirus, it'll be interesting to see what businesses make it and don't make it. Yeah. And then this is kind of like a broader question based on a lot of what we've talked about, because we're obviously really focused on the feedback mechanisms that go into having a better college or more students in the college, attract more businesses so that people stay, et cetera. What do you do broadly speaking? How do you, I don't want to say salvage the reputation of Omaha like its reputation is bad, but when I tell people I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, people are immediately thinking like cows and corn, that like I grew up in a cornfield, that I took a tractor to school every day. But like, obviously if you grow up in Omaha, your experience is going to be similar to Chicago, Minneapolis, Kansas. Like, it's a big city. It's a real city. There are places open all the time. You're driving around in cars, not cows or horses. Like, yeah. And again, this is broad. I know that the downtown renovation went really well. Our downtown looks really cool after all the little cobblestone roads and everything. What other like big things do you think you can do, or what ideas do you think can make Omaha like a hipper place or a more attractive place to people that are under the age of 65, I guess?
Yeah, one of the things that a former student of mine who's going to school in New Orleans said to me, she says, "I'm not moving back." And this is one of those best and brightest I'm talking about. We'd sure like to have her back. I said, "Why?" She says, "I'm not going to live anywhere where I have to own a car."
Oh, yeah.
Things that we can do is free people of the requirement to own a car, which currently in Omaha, it's very difficult not to.
Mm-hmm.
By improving public transportation, we can give you the option not to. Now, that doesn't mean, and that's also an equity issue, by the way, but, it doesn't mean you have to give up your car. Nobody has to give up their car. Have two, I don't care. But, if we can give people the option not to, number one, I think young people will like that. Number two, businesses will really like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an equity issue. Owning a car costs $700, $800, $900 a month, depending on what you've got, maybe way more than that. You license it, register, put gas in it, repair it, make a payment, all that.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you ask somebody, I do this all the time, what would you do with $750 a month? There's nobody who doesn't have an answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it's, I'd stop renting and buy. And for some people, it's, I don't know, I'd go to Hawaii 3 more times a year. I don't care what you do with the money. Everybody has an answer. So improving public transportation is definitely a part of it. I think that the college tuition is going to be a big part of it. And then I think we need to dream even bigger. Recruiting new businesses, making sure they have places to work. That's part of it. And I also think, we talked about the Our Omaha policy and supporting refugees and immigrants. And I think that's hugely important. I think that's part of it. People thinking of this as a global city, thinking of Omaha as a truly beautiful multicultural celebration of what the world has to offer, because we have it here. We have a Somali, community center here. We have Rwandans, we have Burmese and Karen and Yazidis and everybody else. But to find their restaurants, to go to their, cultural celebrations is not a part of the norm of our city, but it could become so, and it could become really magical. We have a gorgeous, I don't know if you've been there, we have a gorgeous Hindu temple.
Where is it? Is this like downtown or mid-city or what?
It's out west, actually. The Hindu temple's out by, trying to think what's out there. It's just north of Center off of, or north of Pacific, I think. I take students there, actually.
Mm-hmm.
We also have the Tri-Faith Initiative and a number of other kind of neat things, really neat things. But, with the Hindu temple, like, they celebrate Diwali every year. Why is the entire city of Omaha not celebrating Diwali? And what would happen if we did? How much would you want to be here if part of the norm, if every day Omaha and the city you lived in was a celebration of culture and the world that you lived in, and it can be.
Gotcha. Interesting. I did not know that. And I live off of, or my house is off of 108th and Center, so I had no idea about the Hindu temple thing.
Perfect also, yeah.
Let's see. Okay. So a lot of these, we're talking a lot, so a lot of these are going to overlap.
I do that. I warned you. I talk a lot.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's good. So we cover a lot of ground. And it's better when things are kind of more, because it's good and bad that everything is connected. It's bad because you can never just fix one problem. Like you said, like, oh, I want to make it so that we have more jobs. Like, oh, well, in order to do that, we need public transport. Oh, well, in order to do that, we need a higher tax revenue. Oh, well, in order to do that, we need more taxpayers. Oh, well, in order to do that, we need increased education. Like, yeah, it's like a never-ending like series of. But then on the benefit, when you start to fix some things, other things, the tide that lifts all boats or whatever. Here's a question from Sprinkles Cold for, what are your plans or concerns around affordable housing? Multiple areas of Omaha have been gentrified using city loans, forcing low-income residents out, like Blackstone, Midtown, and then soon Crossroads. Yeah, I know that there are homeless people in Omaha living in LA now. There are very few there compared to LA, but I do know that they are there. Yeah, I guess what are your ideas around affordable housing? Do you think this is a big issue for Omaha? Is this something that you really want to address? Or?
Yeah, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And there are a lot of things that can be done. I'm a huge fan of mixed income housing projects. Mm-hmm. And it really angers me that the city is giving $80 million in TIF, tax increment financing, right? Basically it's a tax break for the wealthy, which is what most tax breaks do, right? But it's going to allow wealthy land developers to get even wealthier as they build at Crossroads. And they're building housing, and none of it is low income, and none of it is mixed income. And that's a slap in the face to this city. Mm-hmm. And it's another embarrassment. We do need lower income housing. And a lot of that is baked into my other policies. So with the Our Omaha policy, we're talking about, you land in Omaha. I greeted a family, what is today, Friday? I greeted a family 2 nights ago at the airport, a family of 3 coming in from Afghanistan. They land here, they're going to get a small check from the government. They did not speak English at all 3 of them. They had an interpreter. And so there are a lot of things we can do with the policy in terms of, classes and helping them out. The point is, they're going to get a small check. Somebody set them up. There's some great local organizations, Refugee Empowerment Center and Lutheran Family Services and others. Somebody set them up with an apartment, and they're going to have a place to live, but they've got these small checks. They don't have jobs. They don't speak English. This is not a smooth path in front of them. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that's baked into that policy is that the city builds some buildings every year anyway, and I'm not even quite sure why, or if it's just habit. We're going to start building, housing for people and providing, how we might buy some of this too, providing housing for people to live in longer. And maybe they begin to pay and they pay a little bit more every month, but we let them ease in instead of like, here's your $1,200, your rent's $900 a month. Mm-hmm. Good luck, Yeah,
this is like a question. I honestly don't know the answer to this. This is kind of related to this. Why is it that everything at 72nd and Dodge dies? Why does nothing survive there? I actually, because growing up, I always felt like, I know you've got downtown, but that always felt like the center of like, it's 2 huge intersections. You've got Dodge and 72nd, but the mall there is like very depressing, very closed, very dead. I remember there used to be like a Fuddruckers, like all the restaurants that would be, I think it was on the southeast corner of that or the southwest corner of that would always die. Like why can nothing survive on 72nd at Center or on 72nd at Dodge?
Well, I think there are a lot of answers to that question. And I guess I'd say, I don't think that nothing can survive there. I think that, there was a shopping mall. Unfortunately, our plan for that shopping mall is to tear it down and build another one.
Yeah.
That seems problematic to me, but I think it's also a done deal. So I'll do what I can to fight the tax increment financing for that. But I think beyond that, it's going to happen. Hopefully it works. Mm-hmm. Hopefully offering housing and stuff like that works. Across from that is what's called Do Space, which is, I think, a joint project with the city and the community college, Metro, and possibly some other investors. and it's a pretty cool little thing. And I think that I think they're thriving. I hear about it all the time. I haven't looked at their books or anything. So I think, ultimately that's prime real estate. Like the University of Nebraska, Omaha is right there, right? And Children's Hospital is right down the road. Like that is prime real estate. And I think things can do well there. I think that we need to be more deliberate in our planning and more deliberate as a city in what we're putting in. And I do think it's going to help that Orbit, the new rapid transit bus system, runs out there. And I think that's going to be a benefit because it runs right there and then downtown. And I think that's going to be really helpful.
Okay. For this question, okay, so with a lot of focus on the, this comes from Sundraki, with a lot of focus on the police and the media, are there any changes or reforms that you think would be beneficial for the Omaha Police Department?
A number. Yeah. And, the first thing I mentioned earlier, right, revamping the city charter. It said there were other things we do. One of the things I want to do when we revamp the city charter, as a public school teacher, I answer to a board of directors. I answer to the school board. Police and fire, there should be a public safety board. And there was at one point public safety oversight in the charter. It got taken out, ironically, by someone now calling themselves the law and order mayor, I believe. I think we've heard that phrase before.
Sure.
A failed president. But, I think we can put into the city charter civilian oversight. And this is not a punishment, right? It's just how things should be done in a democracy. You don't answer to yourself. We don't need loose cannons around here, And so, that's my wife. Say hi, honey.
You're good. Don't worry about it.
I didn't know that was going to happen. So, getting civilian oversight in place is an important thing. I'm also, as I mentioned, not at all a fan of militarization. And I think, I'm a Nebraskan and I'm from Western Nebraska, so I'm not anti-Second Amendment at all in the way that I think a lot of members of my political party are. I'm anti-civilians owning military-grade weapons. That I find problematic, and I think that a lot of people have tried to link those things like, well, if he doesn't think I should own a tank, then he doesn't think I should own a hunting rifle. And no, I really think you should own a hunting rifle, and I really think you should hunt deer. They're delicious, and it's fun. And please go hunt birds, and, on and on. But, collecting Kalashnikovs, I find problematic. And I find, more to the point, I find a militarized police force, right, to be really problematic. You want to cause a riot, show up in riot gear. You want to prevent a riot, show up and talk. And that's something I'd like to do.
Gotcha. All right. And then we spoke in private a little bit about, because I was wondering how difficult it is to run in terms of like, how do you maintain support from the police? But then you're not running as the Republican, so the police union likely won't be begging. I will say, and I don't know how private, I guess I'll have to talk to them more specifically. I have gotten at least one person from the OPD that's going to be out canvassing with us, which I think is like really cool. One thing that we'll probably be talking a lot about in the future, and then I'll be talking a lot with my canvassers, is that Omaha is in a pretty unique area where we can be a little bit more left-leaning than maybe the rest of the state, or than a lot of people traditionally think Omaha can be. I think the entire country was pretty surprised when was it any District 2 or any District 1? I remember what Omaha's called went, for Biden, which was very surprising. So yeah. Okay, scrolling down, what have we not covered yet? So this is incentives for Omaha to grow as a city. We kind of talked about this. So here's something from Sudi Turn. He asks, how will you address, no, this is kind of the lack of trust many in the community have of the police department, but I imagine a civilian oversight board would go pretty far into hopefully alleviating some of the concerns there.
I hope so. And that doesn't have to be a one-off thing either. We can have other programs. I would like to see, I'd want to talk to the police first because they know what they need. But, one thing that occurs to me, I'd love to see more officers on foot.
Mm-hmm.
In a beat where you can actually talk to somebody and help them jump their car instead of just driving around,
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'd want to talk to our officers and get their feedback, but that, I'd like to see a lot of things done to help grow those relationships.
Mm-hmm. So here's an interesting question. What is one of the biggest criticisms of you or your agenda, and what would you say towards that criticism? So I imagine at this point you've probably talked to a few, I'm guessing on your podcast, you've probably had questions, and then maybe local like talk show hosts. What's like the one question that you find you're getting hammered the most on? Like, you want to come in as a Democrat, how are you going to destroy the police or guns? Or what's like the thing that you get the most that you feel like you need to answer to?
I mean, there's certainly that stuff. The one that I get the most that I find a little perplexing is, why didn't you run for city council?
Mm-hmm.
or something else, And I would tell you, I think the problems that we face are too dire to wait for me to climb that ladder that I don't think people ought to be climbing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And because my skill set lends itself to this office. And I think that that's really important. I hear a lot of, well, you don't have any experience in politics. And I think, thank you. You don't have to flatter me so much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a benefit. I think it's going to be a tremendous benefit to me to go into office and not know how things are supposed to be done, and if someone's listening and not watching, I used air quotes on supposed, but and I don't care. Not only do I not know, I don't care. We're going to do it in a way that makes sense. We'll use common sense and not go, oh, well, yeah, but we've been doing it this way for so long. Tradition can be a real problem. It's a meaningful thing in some instances, but I don't want to see this city stuck in a rut. And I think we have been for a long time. So honestly, my quote unquote lack of experience, I think is one of my greatest assets, but I do get questioned about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're hitting about an hour. I don't want to keep you all night because I know that you're 2 hours ahead here, or 2 hours behind, I guess, depending on how. 2 hours ahead, I think, is what people say.
Whatever. I enjoy it, and I'm grateful that people are interested enough to ask questions.
Mm-hmm. Something that I think I brought up in private to you once, and I'm just kind of curious in terms of how you hear it. So I remember in Omaha, I hear all the time complaints about our property taxes, and then in the next breath, I'll hear complaints about how our schools are underfunded in certain districts. Property taxes being, one of the few taxes that, middle class and Americans definitely feel, or people in Omaha definitely feel. How do you have any plans or ideas on how will you shore up some school budgets, given people's reluctance to look at the property tax? And then another question, and you definitely know this is a teacher in Omaha North. What do you do to shore up the massive difference in opportunity between the different school districts in Omaha? Because man, the difference between Omaha North and West Side is unimaginable. Do you have any, I guess being a teacher, what do you think about any of that?
So, to your first question about shoring up the budget, I think the most important thing right now is going to be defending public schools. Public schools are under attack in Nebraska. We have resisted, we don't have charter schools. We don't. We've resisted it as a state. We don't allow it. We need to continue. We also don't have voucher programs. And if you're unacquainted, and I would completely understand that, what a voucher program does is allows rich people to redirect their taxes toward private schools. And to be a little more clear, and I'm not anti-private school at all. I've got all kinds of friends who teach at private schools, a lot of friends who've graduated from private schools. I teach at a private university. I'm not anti-private school at all. I am pro-public school, but there's a big line to be drawn. But I am take my money away from the public school and put it toward the private school, right? So if you go to Brownell Talbot, my guess is your tuition is north of 20 grand a year. I'm not sure, but it's a pretty prestigious and I think fairly expensive school, private school in Omaha. Well, let's just say your tuition's $20,000 and we put a voucher program in place. Well, now the super rich house I live in, especially if I'm paying $20,000 for, second grade, I pull that tax money out of my school district, the public school district, and put it toward that tuition. So it's a nice little deal for me personally. and destroys the public school system.
Yeah.
And so honestly, as mayor, as a high school English teacher running for mayor, I am, I am going to use the bully pulpit to the full extent of my ability to make sure that that nonsense doesn't happen in this state.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm the mayor of Omaha, I'm the mayor of a little more than 25% of the state, so I can make some real noise, and I will. We're going to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen. So number one, we just have to defend our public schools. Our governor, our wonderful governor, you and I mentioned earlier, actually, so Nebraska ranks 48th out of 50 in the amount of money comes from the state to the public schools. 48 out of 50. Again, embarrassing. Our governor has actually made his priority bill for 2021, putting a further cap on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so just fighting that fight as mayor is going to be really important. To the issue of equity when it comes to paying for public schools with property taxes. This we can circle back. There's wonderful symmetry to so much of this. Well, with TIF, tax increment financing, that is intended to be a tax break to a developer to develop in a blighted area.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we can't give $80 million in TIF to redevelop a shopping mall on prime real estate at 72nd and Dodge. If you want to see a blighted area, come to my classroom and look out the window. And what we can do is take that $80 million and give it to people who want to develop around those schools. And they build whatever it is they were going to build. They open businesses, improve houses, and on and on and on. And that property is worth more.
Mm-hmm.
And those taxes fund the schools. Now TIF is doing what it's supposed to do, and the schools are benefiting.
Mm-hmm.
So some of it, from my standpoint as mayor, is just going to be eliminating the corruption that's going on in our city and redirecting finances that were already approved to support our schools to where they need to be.
Yeah. Yeah. The voucher program sounds like it would be atrocious. As somebody that went to a private school, because I went to prep. I think I was looking at the tuition is like $15,000, I think, a year now to send a student there. And even though you don't have a voucher sending money to the school, there's still like an immense amount of drain that happens funneling kids into those schools. Cause like all of the kids, cause even if you put money aside, like really smart kids with like really like driven parents that want them to succeed are then taking those kids out of the public schools and then sending them to the private schools. And so now those kids aren't in the classrooms, and having smart classmates probably helps every student in the class. And even like small things like bake sales and everything probably go way better in private schools where every parent is loaded, versus in the public schools where now you've taken all those people out. I super valued my private school education. I really love it, but man, one of the things that just made me so upset is for my own kid, I'm going through elementary school. I decided that I wanted to do public elementary school, but not in most of Omaha school districts. Now, I'm thankfully wealthy enough that I can move to like the West Side School District and put them there. But like the thought of like, man, if you just don't have the money for it and you're like kind of like stuck in like a lower performing district, that's like such an incredibly sad and frustrating thing when education is supposed to be like the thing that as long as you go to school and show up, like you're going to have a chance. And seeing people start behind on the public school level is one of the issues that probably makes me the most upset. When it comes to running policies, probably as a parent, because I guess it's something that like I feel a little bit more intimately familiar with. But yeah, geez.
I'll tell you, I've often said to people, education is one of the few realms in which money can fix most of the problems. Not all of them, but I think there are a lot of realms in the world in which money, that's just not going to fix the problem. Money's not going to fix a heartache and things like that, right? Well, in the realm of education, money will go a long way. And so if we can develop neighborhoods and develop the city and make sure that the finances are getting where they need to be, and, there are a number of other things that can be done creatively. I'm going to send my son, who I think made a cameo earlier, is going to start kindergarten next year. And I'm hoping to get him into Jackson Elementary, but which is down the road because it's a dual language immersion program and it's Omaha Public Schools. If he doesn't, he's going to go to Field Club, which is not dual language immersion, but is another really good school. And I'm proud of our public schools. I know there's a lot of room to improve upon them. But I think that that's something that the municipality and the district can work together to accomplish.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's any, I'll just ask a question. Is there any particular program that maybe it's not like as popular or doesn't hit on any of the big talking points, but it's something that you're kind of excited about because you don't hear many people talk about? Like you show up and you're like, man, I wish somebody would ask me about like this thing that I like really enjoy talking about, but it's not like a huge voter issue. Do you have any particular policies or programs like that you're pretty excited about?
Sure. A couple. I think, I mentioned a lot already the Our Omaha policy about refugees. I'm very excited about that. I think it's going to be good for the city and good for people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to improve public transportation. I'm excited to make tuition free for our kids. Those things I'm all excited about. One that we haven't brought up yet, and I don't know if this is on, it's a big deal to some people and other people seem to have mixed feelings. But I want to see the teeth taken out of legislation related to marijuana until such a time as it can be legalized.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be legalized in Nebraska, I believe, in 2022. It should have been on the ballot this year, except for a group of activist judges who literally kept it off the ballot, which was, they found a legal loophole and didn't allow Nebraskans to vote on it. Mm-hmm. Hundreds of thousands of Nebraskans signed petitions that all they said was, yes, I want to vote on this, right? Yes, I want democracy. And a handful of crazy right-wingers with law degrees said, no, we're not going to let you. And they got away with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's disgusting, but it's a temporary problem. We'll vote on it again in 2022. I don't personally use marijuana, but I know there are people who need it for even for health reasons. Medical marijuana is important to some people in their day-to-day life. And so this is something that I've become passionate about over the years and even over the months recently. Mm-hmm. That I'm really excited to just try to help fight for, equity within our marijuana policy as a placeholder until that point when it can be legalized. And again, if I'm mayor, I'm the mayor of 25% of Nebraska, and I'll be banging on that pulpit saying, guys, get this on the ballot. Don't let that happen again. We'll make sure it's on the ballot. We'll let the people choose. And I'm confident that they're going to make that choice.
Gotcha. Are you able to throw, I just don't know, are you able to throw that on like a ballot initiative for any ballot, or can that only happen like every 4 years on the big ones, or how does that work in terms of like what?
Senator Moorfeld is the guy to talk to about that, and he's not hanging out in my.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
I believe their plan is to put it on the ballot in 2022. I know they would do it sooner if they could.
Mm-hmm. So this is a native Omahan posted in my thread, and this is a more nuanced question related to the school stuff. And I understand if you don't want to give an exact answer to this. Are you kind of familiar with the problems related to the Millard school system and then kind of like their refusal to integrate into OPS and everything?
To some extent. I was actually speaking with the representative of Millard Public Schools about that yesterday, so I have some versing in that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, is this something, I can read out the full question, or do you want to kind of speak to that on like, would you have a goal to like more formally like integrate these guys into the OPS, or do you think that they have problems related to kind of gerrymandering their school districts, allocating the poor people over to Millard South and everything, or the way that they draw their borders for, their schools? Do you have any strong opinions related to these things?
I certainly do have opinions about our public schools, and it strikes me that we have a municipality with so many districts in it. Elkhorn's building a third school. Mm-hmm. There will be 3 schools in Elkhorn, high school. I'm just thinking of high school. Yeah. So 3 in Elkhorn. There will soon be 9 in Omaha public schools. We're building 2 more that open soon. They just named the principals a couple days ago.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah. Great people too, but one of them is, Millard has 3 high schools. West Side, right, District 66 has 1, and I find that problematic It's not something I intend to address as mayor, initially, at least. And I'm not entirely sure how to do it either. Um, I do believe that the whole idea of funding, using property tax within the municipality to fund the school districts, right, makes sense. And I believe that education is a human right. When we look at Millard is not what it used to be. This was a big part of my conversation yesterday. Elkhorn probably looks a lot like Millard did 20 years ago. Pretty homogenous group and very wealthy. I don't think Millard is terribly wealthy anymore, and I don't think it's anywhere near as homogenous as it used to be. One of the things that I would say is that if it's good for Omaha, it's good for Omaha's public schools. And if it's good for Omaha's public schools, it's good for Omaha. And so one of the things that I pledged to do early on, if you look at my platform, is to create committees and panels, not only of students, but of teachers and of administrators, superintendents, to sit down and talk about these issues and find the common ground and work together. I recognize that they're complex, and I know that people are very emotional sometimes about their school district. We get proud of schools, right? I can say the Huskers suck. I would rather you didn't,
Sure.
I'll beat up on them because it's my alma mater, but I'll get edgy if somebody in an Ohio State sweatshirt does it.
Oh yeah, sure.
There's an irrational tie to schools as well, which I think is healthy, but I think we have to find ways to work together to support the public schools for sure.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, we're hitting almost an hour and a half here. I think we covered a lot of ground here. I see like a lot of other questions, but they all kind of fall into the vein of stuff we've talked about. I'm sure that if you want to do another one of these in the future, we can also gear another one of these in the future towards other questions as well. Yeah. Do you have anything, I guess any final words or anything you want to say? I think a lot of us will be down there in about 2.5 weeks. I think our first canvassing event is on February 6th and 7th. And then I don't know if we've confirmed anything yet, but I think you're going to come down and like speak to us a little bit before we head out on Saturday morning or something. So.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think to that effect, I began by saying volunteers make the world go round, and I mean it. I knew that when I was the executive director of the Educators Institute for Human Rights, and most of my staff were volunteers. But now as a candidate, it's just increasingly clear to me, this is the thing. This is what's going to make it happen. And so to anybody, especially to you, Stephen, but to anybody who's joining you and wants to come help take back City Hall here in Omaha, I could not be more grateful. I could not be more appreciative. And this is going to make a difference. I mentioned 58,000 people voted in the last primary. There are 8 of us running. I fully expect to win the primary by 50 votes. Or lose it by 50. And so you coming to this city, spreading the word, getting the literature out there, talking to people is going to be deeply meaningful to our success. So I'm grateful. And also, I want to be as accessible as possible. I appreciate this so much. And so I'm definitely going to come down and talk to you. I'm going to go out and canvass with you. I hope we can get a socially distant coffee somewhere along the way. I hope you'll come back. But let's do this again. And people can email me if there are other questions. If somebody gets in Reddit and says, he did not answer my question, please just put us in touch, because I'd love to. I'm just so grateful for the assistance and for people's belief in our vision. And we're going to make Omaha a great city, and we're going to do it together. So thank you.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming to answer some questions. It'll be fun when we do this again, maybe after our canvassing event. And yeah, if you guys want to, what's like your primary thing that you direct people to? Like, visit my website, follow me on Instagram. What's like your big thing that you kind of push people towards?
Right. So Gudgel for Mayor, GUDGEL FOR mayor.com is our webpage. And that's also, you'll find me on social media there. My name is Mark Gudgel. You can find my personal accounts on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. But follow the campaign accounts. We put out, our social media director is phenomenal and puts out all kinds of great information. So please follow us on social media. And if you get on the webpage, you can learn more about us. Listen to the podcast. We have a great weekly podcast that helps disseminate information and promote government transparency. Read the newsletter and just get to know us better. I'd really appreciate it.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining us, Mark. And I will be back to you guys in about 5 or 10 minutes. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.